I'm not doing that test.
So he wouldn't even do the test because
He wouldn't do the test.
he knew exactly what the guy was after.
Well, there's only one reason to request that test.
You want to see if it's from this planet or not.
Right, because we've done it. We've done it with rocks, where you can see if this rock, the isotopic ratio from a rock from Mars is going to be different than that of an Earth rock.
Yeah, I mean, he could have said. I mean, what happened with the situation?
Well, what happened was he refused to do the test, and that was the end of the story.
So he didn't come after him with. Well, I mean, it could be a meteorite or something.
No. This was something that was of manufacture. Okay, you see what I'm saying?
I do.
I mean, if I show you a piece of wood that comes off of some furniture, it doesn't look like a piece of wood you get from out in the forest.
Right. It's been handled.
Right.
Manipulated, created.
Manipulated, machined, and what have you. So, what's my point? This guy's running a lab. He's not doing science. He's not doing science.
Well, because any lab, and this is funny that you bring this up. I have an example with that as well. And we look at the late and unfortunate Ketchum study. Dr. Ketchum submitted to 11 criminal labs of several colleges and got very similar responses from these people. Don't include us in the study. Here's your money back. Do not mention us under any circumstances in the study. I'm talking about criminal labs, man. Talking about, we don't know what this is. Don't mention this. We never did this. We never did this.
We don't know what it is and don't mention us?
That's exactly. Well, no. Upon testing it, unknown human primate comes back multiple times. And then, according to Melba, who I've spent a great deal of time on the phone with over the last couple of years, it's been a while, but in 2012, especially when she was getting her ass handed to her, I was on the phone with her quite a bit. She would call me and we would talk and about what was going on, and it had become very obvious that everyone that tested those samples during the entire process, they were running blind tests in this particular lab and in this college, and they had criminal labs to back up their own conclusions. And these people did not want to be mentioned. Absolutely did not want to be mentioned. And it just stemmed from that right into peer review. I mean, if you can't confirm with the people who conducted the studies in the tests, not that they actually went to that length, because that's not what happened. They never even looked at it. But if you can't confirm with the lab, then what do you have? What do you have? You have nothing. The lab says, we don't know what the hell you're talking about. We never tested that. Goodbye. Have a nice day. Hang the phone up. It's I don't know you, and I don't want to know you.
In other words, their tests were accurate.
According to the study that was released by Melba Ketchum herself, she had difficulty with journals. Apparently, the journal that she ended up purchasing was actually the same journal that, in fact, passed her study, but refused to publish it because their attorney advised them on the matter. So what they did was basically offered to sell her the journal so she could publish it. And that's the way it was put to me on the phone.
Wait a minute. Their attorney, what's the
Dude, I have no idea. I think what it was basically their attorney saying, you are about to go into an area that is going to cause you more trouble in the future than is worth. And the bottom line is they just passed the study, so why not publish? And is the way it was put to me. Now, I can tell you this, when the journal Nature reviewed the study itself, I was privy to emails that were between Ketchum and these peer reviewers. Now, according to the National Academy of Sciences, at that time, all matters of controversial peer review are subject to government policy Your peer reviewers are to be named in each one of them in their respective fields of study. You're to be given certain information about who's conducting the study when it's deemed controversial. Now, since they refused to look at it in the first place and simply tore it apart without proper review, it was technically never peer reviewed in the first place. But in doing so, very clearly violated peer review policies mandated by the U.S. government, and supposedly the NAS is responsible for governing and overseeing that oversight of peer review policy, man. When I looked at those emails consistently, those 4 peer reviewers asked for pieces of information that were contained in the information that they were sent, telling you very clearly, and she said the same thing over and over and over again, it's in the information I sent you, in the supplemental. All you have to do is open it up and take a look. She must have said that 10 times. And to these same people. And it just had become very obvious. And the funniest part about that whole situation is that then we get the media circus blow up and we get public opinion, and suddenly everyone's a geneticist and knows the validity of these samples. And, the bottom line is we were getting debunking and discrediting comments within 24 hours of the release of the thing. And how the hell could you possibly tell? I don't care if you have 7 degrees in genetics, you have not examined and taken the time to look at the actual genome. So where is your opinion derived from that this study is bunk? I look at the situation from that whole thing, and what you just described is the exact same situation. We have two circumstances here, where one with an extraterrestrial possible. I'll rephrase that.
Right, because they didn't do the test.
They didn't do the test, so how do we know? The bottom line is nobody wants to go there. And this is what everybody has to look at. This is the stuff that the public needs to look at. They talk about the NAS being oversight for peer review. Really? Really?
Please, what cartoon is this? Please.
No, it's just become very obvious that if it's a government study on chemtrails, well, obviously we'll be right there. But if it's something that could possibly change what we think about ourselves and then disrupt the agenda, oh God, well, this is malarkey. It's hogwash. It's simply not possible.
Debunkers, please stop this old mantra about there's no evidence. You've got to stop that. You've got to get a new song, because there's lots of evidence. What's going on is that you don't let it in the door.
Oh, that's 100% accurate.
Stop saying. I get so sick and tired of these debunker types on these radio shows, on these television shows, on these documentaries, and they sing in unison, there's no evidence, there's no evidence. And you know damn well that there is, but you don't let it in the door. You don't do the test. And if somehow you end up doing the test and it comes back with results that undermine your preconceived notions, then everybody goes underground. Everybody goes incognito. And you know what that tells me? You're not really interested in progress. You're not really interested in intellectual integrity. You're not really interested in new discoveries. So why don't you just shut your lab down?
I'm in 100% agreement with that. I am in agreement with that. It's interesting that where anything controversial over the decades is brought out, it could be something very simple. It's the contrarium. It's what you describe. You have 4 people over here that confirm, and then you have 3 people over here that debunk, and then you look at the 2, and it's obvious there's an uncomfortability associated with one school,
right?
And then there's a forward progress movement with the other, and the difference is it's changing some aspect within that comfortable status quo, that scientific status quo, and when we see all this stuff, it really does make me ill, because The bottom line is at the core of every person who goes to school to study one of these sciences
Right.
is that curious, natured, being, that
Right.
that child that wants to know the truth. That's why you became a scientist. And I look at this, and it's just it's yeah, the duplicity is overwhelming, overwhelming. And what really is the tragedy in all of this is that it's the American people who could change this, but it's just not that important to them. These subjects, this subject matter, and I think that it just speaks volumes to an inability to register with common sense the difference between reality and a reality television show.
Well, yeah, and I think, and let me tell you, see, this is exactly why I think that, and this is especially. Listen, I don't want to gratuitously bash public schools because my parents were educators in a public school system. You know, la 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 la. So this is not. I'm not doing one of these, predictable public school bashing statements. Because I would dare say that when my parents started teaching in the public school systems, it was a lot different kind of institution. However, I have to say that history, as it's taught, I believe that it's taught in a very dry, uninteresting, uncompelling way on purpose. I think it's done on purpose. And the reason I think it's done that way is so nobody's curious about history. You're just looking at your watch, seeing how soon you can get out of class.
Waiting on that bell.
Wait on that bell. Hey man, we got lunch next. Next period is lunch. Next period is gym.
I can tell you this: outside of that scenario, which I believe is a very accurate and realistic description, because I went to public school. Outside of that, the true nature of history is that it is exciting, fascinating, and
Absolutely.
extremely, extremely contrary to what you actually are taught in public school.
But then and what you said is true. But you just pull the average person, do a man on the street poll.
Yeah,
They'll say, "What history? Oh, it's God. It's boring.
Yeah.
Oh my God."
Well, I mean, they do those polls where they ask who George Washington was, or they say, what was the Civil War, and college students are getting it wrong.
I mean,
that's the importance of history.
It makes you want to cry.
And it's funny because if you really look at it, it's just so obvious that the smartest people and the people with the most power consider it to be the most important subject.
The most important. You're right. You're right about that. And I'm sure some of you listeners, I'm sure you've seen these things on the internet or on TV, and they pull a person to the side, and they'll ask a question like that. Who was the United States fighting in World War II? Now, yeah, and it's funny. It's funny because that should be a slam dunk question.
Exactly.
It's funny, but it's funny because for the same reason, it's not a slam dunk question. Because you see people breaking out into a sweat.
The Dutch. The Dutch. It was the Dutch.
Yeah. Mexico.
Wait, who doesn't have an army? Let's pick one good one real quick.
Right. So my point is, history has been so diluted and watered down and castrated and to the point where nobody's interested. So if you're not interested in history, you're not going to be interested in historical mysteries. You're not going to be interested in, for example, the archaeological discovery that George Washington's engineers made during the French and Indian War. You're not going to be interested in what the Spanish encountered among the Aztecs. You're not going to be interested in any of these things and what the pioneers were discovering out as they moved west. You're not going to care about the conflict between these giant hairy creatures and the Paiute Indians in 1855. You're not going to care. You're not going to care about the encounters of Lewis and Clark, or what was written about the Bigfoot in the Rough Riders, the writings of Theodore Roosevelt. See, all of that ties directly into history.
And on the surface, it appears to have or play a very small part. But if you really look and you take a deeper look, it has played a tremendous part in the development of programming. I can't stress this enough. If you look at one of the most popular channels in the history of television programming, you're going to see the History Channel.
History Channel.
And with the History Channel comes a very limited perspective. In addition to that, when they do cover controversial scientific information, it's with a question mark. It's with a question mark. It's,
I have seen so many programs on the History Channel where it looked promising and then they let you down.
Yeah, and it's not just them. I mean, you look at the National Geographic Society, and the National Geographic Society has some very they're into the sensationalized titles.
Oh, cool.
And I don't mean in the literal sense. They have a series called and it just, the title irks me. It's the Truth Behind series. The Truth Behind series. They have a few other ones, but that one in particular, the truth behind Bigfoot. The truth.
Okay, so they just says truth behind fill in the blank, right?
The Truth Behind is the title of the series.
Okay.
So what you get is you get controversial subject matter, and this is from the title, from the very first hundredth of a second that you see it, you know you are receiving accurate information from a very reliable source who happens to have their logo trimmed in an admiralty symbol. So when you go in and you start to review this information, it invariably, I watch, and at the beginning, it's like you said, you go, okay, well, I hope this time. Of course, over time, I've seen so many different episodes, I know what to expect. But the bottom line is, by the end, if I had a coffee cup in my hand, I'm trying to smash it. You know what I mean? Right. I mean, it's just, they twist the facts around so much, or they'll use people who will twist the facts around. And there is absolutely zero respect for eyewitnesses, right. In so many different subjects. And
the way they twist, but the twisting, it's listen, you say it's almost a contortion.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But here's the thing, though, it's so popular. All these shows are so popular. So when you talk to people, you know they're popular because you will get, in quotes, the exact commentary from this programming. And you'll see it all over social media.
Well, see, yes, they're popular. The subject matter is popular that they're covering. The subject matter is popular. But they're not doing these shows to provide some kind of real analysis of anything.
Oh, no.
They're doing these shows because the subject matter is popular.
Yeah, and here's the thing. If you generate the question, then you have the ability to generate the answer.
Right.
If you generate the question, if you propose the question, then you control the answer. And in the end of the day, that's what this is about. We're generating mass public opinion with this. We're generating a new brand of semiotics, of symbolism in public perception and in public behavior, and it's easy to see this and spot it if you look at the consensus of public opinion on various subjects, and it's highly disturbing because basically what you see is that it's easier to regurgitate something than to investigate it on your own,
Right.
and it really is troubling to me.
You know, and you're never going when you do these shows. They're never going to leave with anything other than a very neutered response to any of these mysteries. I mean, it's always going to be. I mean, listen, I don't know what the Loch Ness monster is, but I do know that there's a history of sightings that goes back centuries. So there's probably something to that question other than folks have just been making this up for hundreds of years. There's got to be. And this is 101 logic. Logic says there's something to it. There's something to it. I've even read stories of technical remote viewers trying to remote view Loch Ness to ascertain what's in the water.
Yeah, man.
So
Well,
somebody at an official level takes it seriously.
absolutely, and where all that stuff is concerned, it's it's trivialized. I mean, you can't do away with the popularity because here we go. The bottom line is this. This makes history interesting. Folks, I've got news for you. This is real history.
Yes.
It is. This is why everything is the way it is. These subjects, sea serpents, lake monsters, oh, it's presented in this way. The bottom line is we're talking about prehistoric relics that have managed to hang on through many, many millennia.
Now, how can that not be exciting?
I personally find it very interesting. However, I also understand that you will not answer any questions on a 3-day expedition to the area.
No.
And that's exactly what you're going to get with these shows.
Yeah,
Extended research into these areas is just not cost effective. And when you look at it, the $7 or $8 million that they're going to make over the course of the year in advertising profits, it's absolutely not worth investing in a 2-man study that would last for a 2-year period and cost $175,000 of it.
A lot of people say to me, because they'll see a show like Finding Bigfoot or something similar, some of these shows. And you know what they always ask me is, if Bigfoot is really out there, why haven't we found it yet? And you know that's a popular question.
Oh yeah, I get that one all the time.
Okay. And I have 2 responses to that, just in case there may be listeners who may be thinking that same thing. Number one, it has been found. That's it has been found. It's been found by independent researchers like Mark. Mark's found Bigfoot. So, the fact that you don't know it doesn't mean that it hasn't been found. Now, number 2 is a bigger question, is because aside from people like Mark, a very small group of independent researchers, nobody's looking. Nobody's looking. Going out in the woods, those guys going out in the woods for 2 or 3 days with electric guitars and disco balls, they're not going to find Bigfoot. If you're out in the wilderness with a Telecaster thrashing away on it, all you're doing to Bigfoot is say, "Don't come here." Okay, so there, just because you see programs, that doesn't mean anybody's looking. There are no universities or institutions or places like that that are out there doing well-financed, well-equipped Bigfoot research expeditions. Because I promise you, if Stanford or University of Chicago or Caltech or you name one of our prominent schools, if they put together a large, well-manned, well-equipped, well-funded Bigfoot research expedition, then you'd have something.
Oh, it would be instantaneous. I can tell you that right now. And I mean, I look at the situation, and I really honestly believe that these people are at a serious disadvantage at these universities. I look at this, and it goes back to that issue we talked about. I think we were speaking privately about it, about the funding, and
Yep.
where does the funding actually come from? And I think that the hoops that are necessary for you to even qualify for funding,
Right.
they ensure that you are absolutely not going to jump ship and run in the right direction. You know what I mean? You're and I say run in the right direction, like
Right.
they're sending you in the wrong direction. First of all, I mean, I'm not saying that there's no value in applying for a grant to study snails. I think that
Well, I'm saying that there's no value in that.
I think that you say that again.
There's no value in some kind of grant for studying snails.
Okay. So I love that. But my thing is I don't want to. Far be it from me to step on a toe.
Yeah.
I look at the situation like a relic population of hominids
Right.
may take precedence in reality for funding over a snail study.
Snail research? Okay.
Yeah. And did you know that I actually had an accurate figure 2 years ago? I think it was $800,000. Over $800,000 was spent on snail research in 2012. I think it was 2012.
So,
And none, zero on the Bigfoot species.
I'm really going to need to see the payoff on that for the human species. You know what I'm saying? I'm really going to need to see where the payoff on that would comes.
I personally don't understand that. I mean, I get it from the researcher standpoint, because you know how it is. The passion is where it lies scientifically. But from the funding standpoint, I think that that's what has to change when we talk about these controversial subjects. When we talk about being able to trust peer review in controversial scientific studies that are being worked on by serious researchers across the country, academics, man. I mean, there's people out there that have this information that really have no option. And I view mainstream science as being victimized at this point by itself. I mean, there's a watchdog that's unspoken. I mean, wouldn't you agree with that? The psychological watchdog of, I don't want to be that guy.
Well, yeah, yeah, you're right. That guy.
Yep.
I don't want to be that guy. Now, see,
It's like I said in I can't remember what show it was, but I said there's 10 chairs, man, and there's only 9 grants. And you're either going to dance the samba and get one of those grants and get a chair, or your ass is out.
that's right. Yeah, and the difference is that you're tied down because somebody else is giving you money.
Hmm.
And if I give you money, you better well believe you're going to do it the way I want you to do it. And that's how it goes. And if you dare stray from the path, this will be the last money that you get.
Oh man.
And that's how it goes.
Well,
And
that's the same thing we got going on with politicians, man. It's like,
Well, yeah.
in a nutshell, if I give you $20 to go to the store and buy groceries, and you're met on the way to the store, and that guy gives you 40, and says, "Well, I need you to do this first," and you actually forget that you were there to serve my interest in the first place.
But this guy gave me more money.
Yeah, well, there you have America in a nutshell.
Right.
You know what I mean? Science, politics, capitalism, baby.
You know, there's always going to, well, I don't want to say always, but there's a traditional
You know, don't listen.
reality to
Don't drain my hope.
bill.
Don't drain my hope now. Don't say always.
I back off. But there's a tradition of, hey man, I yield to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
You know,
What would you call that? Would you call that a lack of integrity? Character?
I'd say this. You know what? I actually had this conversation with somebody from South Korea, and we were talking about cultural differences.
Uh-huh.
And the issue of capitalism came up. And the way it ended up was that I said, my theory is that, there's lots of capitalist systems in the world. I mean, but I said, here, capitalism is not just an economic system. It has become a part of our cultural philosophy.
That's the spirit of hierarchy, period.
Right. It's been inculcated into our culture, so that when we start talking about the concepts of right and wrong, sometimes we infuse fiduciary realities into that. So, like, what's right or wrong depends on what the numbers say.
That's right.
Yeah, but it's true. It sounds crazy, but it really is true.
Well, now let me ask you a question. Would you consider, and I think this would be, now, and I think that there are some of this type of funding in place. I know that it's not an option for controversial studies, though, and that's what I'm referring this same type of thing to. You have these scientific foundations that will offer grants, right? Now, this is the elitists, obviously, correct? Yeah. I mean, they're financing it. And then you have a limited, well, this is what this money is available for, and this is what this money is available for, and there's this and this and that. How would you go about setting up a foundation to fund controversial studies, if it's even possible? Could you just imagine a scenario for us?
Well, listen. I mean, I can imagine a lot now. So that.
Well, this is William Lester.
Yeah. Okay.
William Lester's ideal controversial scientific foundation funding.
Okay,
This is your ideal.
You say ideal. Okay, well, that's easy. Ideal is getting funding and finances, sources of resources from individuals that don't really have an agenda other than the objective of the research. That's the ideal. In other words, money with no strings other than the objective of the research.
Well, let me ask you this, and I'm just John here. Isn't that the way it's presented even now?
Well,
And then afterwards you have, I'm saying, we're studying the mountains. God forbid that you dig something that's above average size out of that ground. I mean, I have taken, actually, on 3 different occasions, eyewitness reports from academics, archaeologists, all 3 of them, that their finds disappeared and transferred to the university. I'm talking about giant skulls. And evidence within that tagged catalog from the dig site of culture along with those skulls.
Yeah.
So here we have the ideal situation on the surface. But how would we I guess you'd just have to be a millionaire yourself, wouldn't you?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, there's got to be, it's got to be more than on the surface. It's got to be, it's got to be, we get money to do research and there's no strings. In other words, we are being funded to investigate this, and we will continue to be funded no matter what we find, no matter how crazy or controversial it seems. there's going to be no agenda or attempt to curtail
Ooh, good word.
what we're going to uncover. So that's the ideal. That's the ideal. There's no nonsense tied to our funding.
So essentially, what I hear you saying is everything's already in place, with the exception that you have entities that through some, what was the term you used earlier, uh, in regards to through some type of a secretive uh, branch or compartmentalization, have the ability, and obviously from the inception, the permission
Yeah.
to show up
In other words,
and
like
take it.
somebody sends you a check, and and they say, hey, look, knock yourself out. And I don't care if you're digging around and you uncover, a fire-breathing dragon. It's cool because we can put that on a T-shirt, we can put that on a website, we can turn it into a video game. There's a revenue stream there. If you find a dragon, there's a revenue stream, so we're all for it.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that if something like that happened, and really, to be honest with you, I think we're talking about cashews compared to Brazil nuts, because dinosaurs are real, dragons are real, as far as I'm concerned. But that symbolism, I get it. But I look at the situation, you know what I mean, and it's like But my thing is it seems like no matter how astute or no matter how on the level this all seems to academics, it's like you were telling your son, it's going to happen sooner or later, especially in these hard science fields, man. You're looking at going back, and I mean, it's probably getting harder than it was, especially with the mounds. Right? We look at the mounds here in America. They said there's been estimates 90-something% of them have probably already been excavated. Is what I'm hearing. And with the technology they have today, they can see it from space. And don't kid yourself. Know what I mean? I mean, I've spoken to people that have been over 1,000 feet underground, talking to a guy on a headset who's watching them pull things out of their pocket from another state. So I understand the technology that's out there, and that's the truth. You look at situations, and these people know what's going on. This is the argument is the disturbing part.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Oh man.
I mean, it's so insane. When I hear these people say, "Well, you're one of those guys who's looking for aliens and Bigfoot and leprechauns,"
Oh, there you go.
and they always throw in something that is that. Well, no, I'm not. No, I'm not looking for leprechauns.
Yeah.
And they throw that in. They throw the leprechaun part in to suggest that it's all equally silly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's equally silly.
That's their disclaimer
Right.
right there. This can't be real. I mean, look, those three are together.
Right. Exactly. And it's part. And see, that's part of the subliminal, psychological. It's semantic. It's semantic. You say that, and it's condescending. And it's like, no, leprechauns. What are you talking about? That kind of thing. And then, of course, you end up having to justify what you're doing by saying looking for Bigfoot is not like looking for leprechauns. So you end up sounding silly too.
Yeah, it really is interesting how they respond to my comments that follow typical rhetorical comments like the one you just stated. I mean,
right.
I generally follow that type of commenting up with a psychoanalysis, immediate psychoanalysis on that individual.
Right. Right. So these are just a few of the things that I've heard over the years, and I would not be engaged in any of these investigations. I wouldn't even be engaged in a discussion on these topics if I didn't think there was something to it.
Oh, me neither, man.
Because the people, and I'm sure this is true of you, people that know me will tell you that I don't spend any time at all on things that I consider to be nonsense.
No, I'm exactly the same way.
I just don't, because there's no time. There's no time for it. So so when you
Now, in reality, uh, we are the antithesis, our type, and others who look into controversial information or what has been deemed. I hate labeling it that, because who in the hell said this is controversial in the first place? I find television programming to be the controversy. You know what I mean? I look at everything that's going on, and through it all, we are the outside. We are the pole. We are the antithesis. We are, the redheaded stepchild. I know, man. It's ridiculous.
In our time, uh, uh, and it's interesting because like today, controversial seems to mean information or realities or concepts that are patently obvious, but these other people are uncomfortable by the realities and the concepts, and or not smart enough to digest and integrate them.
I like your definition better than mine, so
Because
I'm going to go ahead and.
it's controversial.
I'm going to use your definition from now on.
It's controversial, right? It's controversial because I'm not smart enough to figure it out.
Yeah. Or I'm so uncomfortable.
I'm so uncomfortable, right? Well, it's either or. It's either or. Either it makes me uncomfortable, or it's just too much for me.
Yeah.
So and a lot of this can be laid at the feet of the media because they'll put that word out there because the media is always they're afraid to
attach themselves.
They create this artificial dichotomy and just split everything 50-50.
Well, I see the structure of that as well, and essentially what you're looking at is you have permission. Someone has permission to own the local network from the big dogs. There is no. What are you talking about? You want to own a television? What are you doing, man? You know what I mean? That's not how it works, man. This is the FCC involved here. This is the government involved here. You don't just own a local television station. And this news is handed down from network. Yes, sure, you can cover your local events. Don't get too outside the box.
You mean controversial?
Controversial. That's right. Yeah, and I look at all of this stuff, and it's we see these facts come out in a lot of movies and television shows, in the way we're goaded into our thought process on a lot of different aspects of our lives. I think that programming plays a huge part in how we figure out our core beliefs from the time we're children. And I look at how that stuff has affected me in my life, and thanks to my instructors, my teachers in public school,
Mm-hmm.
I was able to identify very quickly what I was interested in and what I wasn't interested in,
Right.
and I developed a thirst for knowledge, alternative information, because it was obvious to me right off the bat that what I was being told wasn't making sense. And I started to look into more advanced information
Right.
on various subjects, and I look at what's going on, and really, you could go to college and you could get an academic degree and you could pursue all of this stuff.
Right.
But in the end of the day, there's only so far you can take these subjects that we delve into. And that's the travesty of all this, man. I
Right.
mean, where are we at here when the truth itself is a bad thing? We start looking at really what's going on here with our consciousness in these subjects and all of the stuff that we think and know about it. And man, just to sit back, I took 3.5 years and I just sat back
Right.
and I watched. I listened to what was being said. I joined skeptical blogs and I paid close attention to what was being said by who was saying it, who were these people, and then I joined all kinds of groups and I tried to learn in so many different respects what was going on. The one constant, and the core of all of this is that when there is information presented that is from these subject matters that we've been discussing and will continue to discuss here on Agenda Earth, whenever that information is presented, it does not matter what media it's presented in, there is always, without fail, a contrary opinion. And I think that that's why when we started Crypto Reality, we wanted to, and in particular the Bigfoot Researchers Journal, we wanted to present that information in a different way, in a way that was where we didn't allow any of that. Not that we don't want questions or opinion, because that's
Right.
not the case. But in the contrary, there has to be an element of reality, man. Know what I'm saying? An element of fact or truth. You cannot, and that's where when I was talking about, there's always this contrary that has no base in the reality of what's being viewed. I mean, we're talking about physical evidence all over the planet for the subject matter we've been talking about. There were giants in the earth. In the earth.
Right.
Where were they finding them in America? In the earth. Where were they finding them over here? In the earth. Where, I mean, dude, and in those days and also after that. Where were they digging them out of the ground from 4 million years ago? We've been digging these corpses out, man. I mean, all this stuff's been happening. And also after that, yes. Some of these things are not millions of years old. That verse in Genesis 6:4 is a historical verse that rings true to this day in every single aspect of this subject of giants. Just that one sentence is incredible because it's so accurate. And if you begin to look at all this stuff, this information always has that contrary attached to it that has no base in the reality we find ourselves as objective researchers.
And see, the other thing too is, I talked about how we played with the meaning of the word controversy. See, one of the other things we've also done is, and I mentioned this in another show also, some things are just true.
Oh,
And it's not open to, this idea that what's true is open to interpretation is one of the great intellectual man traps of our time. It is. If I tell you that today is such and such date, and you say well, that's open to interpretation. See, we're going down the wrong path. No. Some things are just true. Now, even in instances when you don't like that information or it isn't comfortable for you, it's still true. You still have to acknowledge the truth of it. Okay? And so what some people do is decide what's true and what's not is just malleable in accordance to what's palatable to them. Some things are just true. And some things, conversely, are just false.
oh.
And you can go on trying to stick a square peg into a round hole or a round peg into a square, whatever, however you say it. And it's still going to be true. And it's still going to be false. And the things that are true are going to stand up to scrutiny. And things that are not true are going to crumble under scrutiny.
Mm. Hey, we see that. We see all of this crumbling with the repositioning that you described earlier of these organizations. They're repositioning themselves to cover their asses. Is the bottom line. You talk about the NAS
Yes.
and their evolutionary information, the new information that is contrary.
See, they drop one little blurb in there, and just one little blurb so they can properly calibrate their position.
Let's see what kind of response this gets. And the bottom line is I believe that that's a direct reaction.
Of course.
That's a reaction to the information and the force with which this information is being presented by people like you and I.
Well, plus two. Well, like I said before, Mark, they know what we know.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
They know what we know. They're just slow to come around. And every once in a while, these big megalithic institutes. Every once in a while, they rouse from sleep and they readjust. And that's what you see happening.
Well, I can tell you this.
You know how your grandpa's sitting on the couch, and every 30 minutes or so he wakes up and checks the score of the game, and then drops back off.
That's right.
That's what they do. Make sure. Okay, now I know what inning it is.
Right. Hey, you know what? I think that's a pretty good spot to step into the next area of investigation.
Okay.
I mean, what do you think? What do you think about taking a look at this because it came up earlier in the show at the whole intervention theory? What do you think we take a look at that? Well, why don't we talk about how about this? How about hybrids and the intervention theory? Because I think those two will tie in together nicely with our Giants thing. Modern day hybrids,
Right.
examples of gigantism in modern day hybrids, and how that ties in with the intervention theory and the ancient giants moving into today, of course.
I think it's a great topic. I think because you still can't get away with that without talking about the Anunnaki.
That's right.
Can't get away with it without talking about the Egyptians, these pharaohs, and these quote god kings. You can't talk about it. You got to talk about the ancient Greeks because you talk about this hybridization. Well, the ancient Greeks had a word for that, demigod.
Yeah, or Nephilim.
Nephilim.
Yeah, man. Would be another way to.
If you look at all of the heroes in ancient Greek mythology, they were all part human and part deity.
I think that's a fascinating subject. Do you think we can pull some information on that? I think there's a wealth of information on that, man.
I think information will start getting pulled in very short order.
Yeah, man. You know what? I find that the more I look into Rome, in ancient Rome, the more curious I am about where this information that they got comes from, and it's interesting, actually.
Right.
It's a different twist on a lot of older stuff, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
But see, we're not presented that information like that. We don't. You ask the average person, they're not going to even know what the hell you're talking about.
Well, again, it's that thing, and since you mentioned the Romans, I mean, they had this saying, which I think somehow, even if it doesn't tie in, I think I can make it. I can make it tie in.
Spin it, man. Spin it.
It's a Latin, quis custodiet ipsos custodes. Who watches the watchers?
Oh. That's perfect.
You only get that here, ladies and gentlemen, on Agenda Earth.
That's great, man.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that's a good one.
Yeah, and so, but absolutely, yeah. This whole concept is something, and yeah, we need to pull some research on that, and share this with the listeners.
You know, I actually heard an interview with Steve Quayle, who's written a few books on the Giants over the years, and he was talking about how I believe it was one of the generals. I could be wrong. It might have been a Caesar named Maximus.
Maximus Thrax. That was his name.
Yeah, he was said to have been so large that he could lift a Roman chariot with one arm, and not only that, but that his wife used to wear his ring on her wrist. That's how large this guy was.
His name was Maximus Thrax, and he was
a giant. A giant.
He was emperor. He was only emperor for 3 years.
Oh, so he was an emperor.
Yeah, he was an emperor.
But now, I mean, by description, this is a giant we're talking about, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, why wasn't that, I got a question for you. Why wasn't that in my history book?
Well, because nobody wanted to. Well, because the people who publish the history books, that was filtered out.
100%.
It's filtered out. I mean, because even if I were, and listen, let me tell you something. I haven't mentioned this on the air. Listen, I worked for a very brief period of time as a content developer, writer for textbooks.
Okay.
All right. Not only for textbooks, but for test books, like people who study for the GRE or the SAT or these tests like that.
Are you telling me that you used to help create the hoops?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And so I can tell you in no uncertain terms that there is a system of filtration that, I mean, I saw employed every day. Now, there are times when, filters are necessary. I mean, obviously. But there were times when things that might, kind of be interesting were left off the table.
Oh, I don't doubt it. Like take, for instance, here's one for you since we're on Rome. Yeah. I have heard alternative versions of the story of the Ninth Legion. I heard a version of that story in the disappearance of the Ninth Legion of Rome in north of Hadrian's Wall in England, that they actually were taken and slaughtered by giants north of that wall. Now, I don't know that that's the case, but in an alternative, I mean, we're talking about an entire legion of Rome's best. You know what I mean? Right. Just vanishing off the face of the earth. I don't know if you've ever heard anything like that, but I think that it's very possible that if there were actually giants in Rome, that there were actually giants since London itself was founded by a giant, that it's very possible that there were giants in Scotland. What do you think?
Well, I think so. I mean, I have heard that story of the ninth. Now, of course, there is the account, the contradicting mundane explanation, which I find not credible at all. That they were destroyed or they were overwhelmed by these local Celtic tribes.
Right. The Great War Machine itself.
Yeah. Which I just first of all there's no real evidence to that, and that doesn't seem feasible to me.
It doesn't seem feasible to me either, especially when you look at the organizational tactics of the berserkers, which is basically what they were calling them. And then, you start looking at the fact that Rome's military had literally conquered its way to England.
Right.
There was something else going on. And I'll tell you another thing. If we look at just the basic idea that they built a wall, people. They built a wall. Where were these other walls built? What were they called? I mean, we're talking about the ramparts of Magog, the Great Wall of China. You see these things in areas referencing giants all over the planet. I think there's more than enough evidence here that I would love to do an investigation on that to try to find some alternative information. I don't know that it exists, but it would be interesting if there was a scholar somewhere throughout history who had some more accurate information. I believe more accurate information, anyway, and that had inferences of giants in it at some point. As to the demise of the Ninth Legion north of Hadrian's Wall, man, it doesn't make sense to me, like you said. Me either.
It's I have to look up the exact quote, but I think Hadrian himself said that he described it as a, quote, total catastrophe. Okay, and so and like I said, I need to pull out some more information, but I remember that quote.
Well, let me ask you. Let me ask you this: was the wall built after the Ninth disappeared?
That I don't know for sure.
That would be an interesting little tidbit, I think.
Let's see. Yeah, we need to pull that.
We're going to have to figure that one out. I think that makes a hell of a show right there, buddy.
What was the exact date that, because the date that they
if the Roman
versus when the reports got back that the Legion was missing.
That would show
Yeah.
that they were anticipating a serious attack.
Right.
I think that's interesting. And not only that, but I'd like to get some more specifics on height and length of that wall. Thickness, height, and length. The sheer size and magnitude of what Hadrian's Wall was. It's been depicted on several occasions in several different films, but I don't believe those depictions are accurate. I think that wall is...
In a film, unless it's an unusual film...
you're not going to get an accurate depiction.
Yeah. I keep an eye on a lot of historical films that...
Same here, man.
But let's, I might, let's see if I can pull something about that wall.
Well, I mean, hey, look, man, we've already got evidence that the English clearly think that giants founded London. So who knows? Who knows where this could lead?
Okay, now I got here, what I have in my notes is that the construction of the wall started in 122.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see.
122 years after Christ.
Or well, if you try to add it up, so you say maybe 90 years or whatever it is, 80 years or whatever his age was at the time of the crucifixion. I don't know.
Oh, right.
So let's see. Significant portion of the wall. Dimensions. The wall is right now. What we can see and or detect. Okay, is 73 miles long, or what was considered 80 Roman miles, because their system of measure was a little different.
Right.
But approximately 73 miles long. Some of the squared stone is...
I'm sorry, did you say stone?
Squared stone. Some of the stone squares are 9 to 10 feet in dimensions and 16 to 20 feet high. So,
Well, let me ask you this: is that's not an accurate height of the wall? Those are just some of the stones used, correct?
Some of the stones, yeah.
So we're talking about a wall that's of considerable height as well.
Right, and again, it's very hard now because it's very hard now to imagine what it must have looked like at its peak.
Oh man! Well, you've got a lot of different additional wooden structures on top of it. You've got gates. You've got all kinds of stuff going on.
Right. I mean, but we're talking about something built 2,000 years ago, so it's very difficult to.
But again, we're talking about the greatest, most battle-hardened soldiers on planet Earth, going to the extent that they actually built something like the Great Wall of China. Obviously, not even near the same undertaking, but the same design. I mean, we're talking about a wall made of giant stones.
Right.
That obviously would not be easy to break down.
And 73 miles. I mean, are you serious?
Yeah, like how long did it take? I mean, I wondered, you know?
Uh, that's a good question. Let's see.
I'm sure that they used slaves from every country they conquered on the way there, so.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's no shortage of.
But then again, too, if some of those stones are larger than I mean, we're talking about the possibility that some of these maybe possibly participation of giants building Hadrian's Wall.
Well, it says here the wall was largely completed in 6 years.
Whoa.
6 years. 73 miles of wall in 6 years.
That completely outdoes modern day construction.
I mean, and
by a mile.
And they must have been working around the clock.
I wonder what would prompt a decision like that.
They must have been working around the clock.
It'd have to be.
And you're talking about a period in history where there was no use of, as far as we know, no use of electricity, no use of hydraulics, no use of artificial sources of heat or light, as far as we know. Because remember, you have to avoid the anomaly.
That's right.
Now the Romans do. The Romans.
Well, you can't get around either way. You can't get around cranes, whether they were giant arms doing it or gigantic bundles of trees. Yeah, you needed a lifting mechanism. Fulcrum is necessary. Period.
Yes. So that's what we're talking about. A general construction completed in 6 years. Of course, you know how it is. You tweak it here and there as you go along.
That is
to maximize its defensive capabilities. So, of course, and it had the what do you call it, the sentinel stations, the watchtowers. So
they were definitely afraid. They were definitely afraid of something.
Well, absolutely. I mean,
somebody had to have made it out of that. There has to be an account somewhere from the 9th. Somebody. I mean,
every soldier. There was some survivors.
Well, possibly one or two, or I don't know, a small band of them. I look at the situation like in any given battle, you're going to have cowards, and they are going to flee, and some of them just on sheer mathematical equation are going to escape. Someone had to have known what happened, and that's the reasoning behind that wall. Is my opinion. I mean, it makes it's logic. Just using logic. They disappeared. What are the odds that they all simply deserted? Next to none. We're talking about a legion. We're talking about respected commanders. No desertion. Come on, man.
I mean, desertion to me it's very far fetched.
Yeah, this is Rome we're talking about, man.
Yeah. That's that.
You don't conquer 3/4 of planet Earth's dry land with a bunch of desertion problems.
Yeah. It's a. I think we're going to have some fun with this. It's going to be very, because it's an interesting question.
I think so too.
It's one of those historical curiosities that
it's another red herring. It's another red herring.
Right. Yeah. Do we really want to know?
That's right. It's a red herring in the giant mystery, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you've got the exact same behavior from another conquering army, another conquering nation, another conquering empire with the exact same behavior. The other thing is that if we look at Great Britain, we have the English Channel, so we have a little separation from land. The Romans may not have known what they were getting into when they sent the 9th there. Know what I mean? I mean, there's a lot of stuff we need to dig up on this. I think that's a great investigation.
it says here, I just read a little clip here that says, in the year 165, that a complete accounting of all the existing legions was drawn up in Rome, and the ninth is not in that listing. It says, let's see. Yeah. So in 165 in Rome, there was a complete audit of all the existing legions. And the ninth was not included in that audit.
Man, that's something else.
So in Rome, they were aware of the disappearance of the ninth, at least by 165.
Wow.
So we can establish that. We can establish that the ninth had disappeared, and it was known by the governmental body in Rome by as soon as 165.
Man, that's incredible. That's incredible. And you know something? I think that I think we're going to find some more information on this. I know they do a real good job of doing away with it, but I think there is some more information out there on this, and I think that we're going to be able. I just have a funny feeling we're going to be able to link this to information on the participation of giants, either on one side or the other.
Absolutely.
I see too many similarities here in other historical battles and situations where defensive strategy is deployed on a mass scale, and in those previous circumstances we have records of giants being involved.
It'd be an interesting little sub-study to go back in history and see if we can find examples of armies engage with what might be described as otherworldly or mythological or supernatural opponents.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Because we know, for example, during the Trojan War, we know, for example, that the Trojans claimed that these gods were on their side, and of course the Greeks claimed that these gods were on their side and they're going to help them win, and this, that, and we have all these stories about, of course, the Greeks have Hercules on their side, and all of these type of things, and there is a little bit of a historical tradition of these anomalous elements appearing in warfare.
Hey, you're talking about Achilles and the Myrmidon.
See, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I never read any depictions of them that I would deem to be accurate when considering his battle record.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean that's we're talking about the mighty men of old.
Right.
Yeah, this is great, man. This is great. I think that's gonna wrap us up. What do you think?
I think it's a great show. I think I hope that we've given the listeners something entertaining, something informative, something they can take away. Determine, depending on their level of interest. Hey, go research it. Just take some of the things you've heard from us and look it up yourself. But we really enjoy bringing these questions and ideas to you. So, I am Dr. William Lester.
And I'm Mark Zasky.
And this has been Agenda Earth. We'll see you next time.
Have a wonderful week and a wonderful weekend.